how's it going, everyone? Thank you for joining me on a new episode of the Music for Your podcast. My name's Josh, and thanks for joining me on what you would call a special edition of this podcast series. Typically, if you're aware, I usually do album reviews or a weekly segment called Best and Worst Track of the Week. Occasionally, I have been dropping one offshoot, topical videos. This, I guess, would fall into that category, although it's not really topical. The last one I did, for instance, was a video that I got a lot of tracks from a alternative top 40 chart and just reviewed what I thought was interesting from that. This is in a similar vein, but really all I'm doing on this episode is just taking some new release tracks from various artists that I wouldn't typically get to review on the album review side or the Best and Worst Track of the Week, since all the tracks from Best and Worst Track of the Week come from the Hot 100. So basically some tracks from artists that I am aware of or I think are interesting enough to talk about. So basically artists that I would never really have the chance to review, such as on this episode I'm going to be touching stuff from Iceage, The Offspring, JID, Still Woozy, Dayglow, Julian, Kero Kero Bonito. So if you're interested in some of the tracks from those artists, here are some recently released tracks that I'm just going to be talking about. And that's really all this podcast is about, just talking about music, because that's what I love to do. Hopefully you like talking about it too, or just, hearing, commentary on that sort of thing. So thanks for dropping by. But before we get started, I just want to let everyone know the most recent episode from Best and Worst Track, or the most recent episode of Music Reviewer Podcast was Best and Worst Track of the Week. The week of February 27th, I believe, I touched on a track from Nipsey Hussle on there, featuring Jay-Z. Thought that was the best track. It ended up being that versus Giveon, the up-and-coming R&B artist. Also some tracks from artists like Dua Lipa, Taylor Swift with her retouched Love Story track, a little TJ Black. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, go ahead and check out that episode. It's on YouTube and anywhere the podcast is found. Also, kind of went under the radar in terms of other album reviews. The latest album review I dropped was the latest album from Arlo Parks, Collapse and Sunbeams. I thought that was a pretty solid record. If you have a chance, check that album out, but also check out the review that I did. Can be found everywhere the podcast is found as well. But yeah, on that note, this will also be just a YouTube-only episode. So if you're listening to this, right now it's just going to be on YouTube. Depending on how I think the episode does, it may go up on the regular podcast side as well. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and get started. So basically I pulled all these, just from recent track releases. Some from that same top 40 alt chart, but also stuff that literally just dropped this past Friday. It's the middle of the week now since that Friday, but still really fresh tracks. First one was Wolf Alice, Last Man on Earth. Wolf Alice is a band that I kind of really liked their sound, and I really dug when they first came onto the scene sometime around 2015 or 16. Can't really remember this at this point, maybe sooner than that. They kind of hung around, kept their relevance. I will admit I probably neglected much of the band's discography since I've heard their first single come out. Was interested to hear how the sound has changed on this track. It's pretty uncharacteristic of the band, very piano-centric, singer-songwriter-esque. Honestly, gave me the vibe of that one track, kind of totally random, the Jar of Hearts track by Christina Perri. Sounds a bit like that sort of vibe on that track. Same sort of, song structure. A piano instrumental with some quarter note chords being played and some vocals on top. But obviously Wolf Alice, they ended up progressing this track a bit away from that as the track built up, because overall it's a slow-paced track, but it aims to build up to something The track also features some interesting haunting vocal effects as the track progresses, and eventually gets to this eerie sounding children's choir bit in the climatic area. But the mix sounds a bit distant on those vocals, and then it's a bit buried on those bright synth textures that just kind of dominate everything. It's weird for a lead single, but I do like the punchy, deep, resonating bass that cuts through at times on this track. I thought that was a highlight there. But the track does become more interesting after a bit. It doesn't totally falter on that interesting piano singer-songwriter style. Next track was from Julian Baker, Heatwave. I'm loving the rustic folk-like nature on this track from Julian. Kind of reminds me of some of the intro instrumental bit. Kind of reminds me a bit of like some Kurt Weill music. Julian on this definitely changed up her style a bit. This is more of a straightforward indie pop, adult alternative sound with some folkiness thrown in. She's usually in that vein of like this very dramatic, piano-centric or slow-paced, I don't know, it's like indie pop, rock style. This is a bit different. I love the build-up section on that bridge too. It features some dry guitar textures that fit the track nicely. Nice track, solid all throughout. Next track I've really enjoyed as well from Kero Kero Bonito, The Princess and the Clock. Another band actually that I've should have been more, more attentive to their discography, because most of the times, I guess like 8 times out of 10, I really dig their stuff that they put out. That I've heard. This track is no exception. The track features a lovely charm and color to it, some light and bubbliness to the track overall, and there is a shift to a more heavier dynamic when we get to like that first chorus moment section. It's a weird transition in the track, and the track does utilize various electronic elements to structure and embellish the track quite tastefully as well. I think the track takes a bit of an interesting direction as it progresses and eventually ends with a more relaxed feel. It's not bad. I thought it was a solid track for the most part. Next track was from Dayglow, titled Something. At first I thought I had heard this song before, but that was actually his prior lead single on his new album coming out in the spring, I think. I will say this one didn't captivate me nearly as much. The previous lead single I'm referring to is actually called Close to You. This track in comparison has a bit of an abrasive groove that structures the track all throughout. Like I said, I guess I don't really like this direction that Dayglow went on this track. Especially how it's structured to build up to like this quirky synth melody as a focal point of the track, and that's really all we get. It doesn't really have like that signature Dayglow charm I usually take from some of his tracks. Close to You seemed a bit more of an impactful single overall in comparison to this. The track is interestingly less than 2 minutes as well, so it's a bit short for his typical, I guess, track runtime. We'll see. Maybe this is just an experimental sort of thing from the young indie pop artists. Next track was from Still Woozy, Rocky. Another band or artist that I really dig a lot of his stuff, I guess most of the time. Hopefully a new album is coming down the pipeline. This track just has a funkiness and grooviness to it, a bouncy bass line that structures the track. With his kind of like signature bedroom pop aesthetic that he kind of puts his own twist on. The track sounds a little bit similar to the latest material from the artist Enjoy that was recently put out on his album late last year. This track in comparison maybe just has a bit more of a dreamier sound and etherealness. Woozy's voice has a buttery smooth tone to it as well. But I will say the usage of the synths and like how they color the track are quite similar to the material from Enjoy. But I thought this was a nice track. It wasn't bad. Next track was from JID, Skiggy. Pretty hard-hitting track for the most part from the rapper. A rapper that I honestly have not really bought much stock in, but I know he is of the, I guess, variety that is expected to be quite a force in the rap game if they're not already. And I can kind of see why. I got a lot of Kendrick Lamar vibes on his delivery on this track. The beat has a loose feel to it. I love the moaning sampled vocal all throughout this track. Gives the track a nice flavor. JID's voice fits, JID's flows fits nicely onto this track, and it's a solid delivery overall. Like I said, Kendrick-like. And also the chorus section has a sort of like vocal dialogue that I will say wasn't that interesting. I would have liked maybe that turned into a different direction. I just found that bit to be a low point of the song, unfortunately. Next track was from the Offspring, Let the Bad Times Roll, from the, I guess, veteran punk juggernauts. Interesting way they've gone, or they're going. Sounds like they're definitely trying to appeal to a younger generation with this track featuring a lot of pop sense and accessibility as well. It sounds like confused pop punk from, like, I guess, the late 2000s to early 2010s. I wouldn't really have batted an eye if I heard this at a Hot Topic, honestly. I'm just not sure what to think. The track is reminiscent of something that I was listening to in the distant past, like I said, possibly when I was in high school. They're definitely committed to the sound, I say. I don't know if that's necessarily a great thing for the band at this point. They're very waist deep while going deeper into this pool of what they're trying to do in this pop realm with it. So take that with what you will. Not really sure what to think of the track. This next track, though, was a bit of a surprise. I really dug this one from Age Vendetta. Kind of reminds me of like the big sounds bands were getting back in the 90s, a la Oasis, bands like that. Love the dirty and messy guitar work on this track. It gives the track a sort of grimy color to it. The vocalist on here sounds a bit less quirky than he usually does on a lot of these Iceage tracks, but it really works out on this track. Digging the shaky auxiliary percussive elements on here. The track has a bit of a trancey nature to it as well. I feel like I just listened to this on a loop for a very long time and continue to be captivated. Almost shoegaze-like as well, with this wall of distortion layering throughout this track. Also, honestly, I think this is probably the best track I heard from this batch of tracks. Next one was from Mogwai, Pat Stains. This is honestly one of the first tracks I can honestly say I paid attention to from Mogwai. And if someone's screaming at me, telling me I'm an idiot for that, go ahead. I will totally take that. Because I know this track has this band has some prominence to it. I honestly just never taken the time to listen to much of their discography. And I thought this was an interesting track. I don't know if this track is representative of what the band is capable of or what they've done. I would probably say no, just because I know how expansive the discography is. But this track kind of just reminds me of like a slow, sultry groove you'd get in like a dramatic La Dispute type track. Just kind of waiting for spoken word to pop in at any time. The lead guitar riff is a bit buzzy and thin the more and more you hear it. But eventually it kind of just smooths out, I guess. The bass work is mixed a bit lightly, in my opinion. Would have liked to hear a little bit more punch or, I guess, pop to it. The track is a bit static as well. Not enough progression or added voices to make it that much more captivating. Maybe until the more obvious climatic and louder section towards the end, or does it pick up? But I was a bit middle of the road on this track. I definitely should, though, pay more attention or just go back and listen to what the band has to offer, because I'm sure this isn't representative of what they're capable or have done. And the last track this week was from Wallows, Quarterback. Wallows is a band that I'm always a bit surprised about how under the radar they are, but at the same time they have enough following where I'm just like, yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense, especially with the frontman being of a popular TV show on Netflix. And honestly, I've been I guess a proponent of some of the earlier Wallows work. They kind of have like this fresh sort of, or they had this fresh sound to indie pop at one point. It was just kind of like they're trying, but at the same time they like have this vibe where they're very cool, and it kind of seems effortless at the same time. I don't know how to explain it, but it just seemed like Wallows had a bit of a swag to them, especially if you look at them. They're all very good-looking people in the band, but the track has this track specifically has a poppy and bright sound to it. I like the dry, plucked bass tone that stabilizes the track at certain moments when it pops in at times. Some glitchy synth textures that make the track a bit interesting. It's a very synth-centric track, which a lot of the work is, but maybe not the most memorable or catchy Wallows track I've heard. Not bad, though. I don't know if this is really this track is alluding to a new album coming out. But yeah, this was the batch of songs this week. Thanks for staying with me if you made it to the end. Hopefully I can do more of these just relevant, newer tracks. It was kind of a nice fresh of breath air for doing this podcast. Sometimes best worst track of the week can be a bit of a challenge to get through. But anyways, thanks for tuning in on this episode. Make sure to tune in on to some album reviews in the future. Subscribe and like if you dug what you heard. Leave some feedback, good or bad as well. But nonetheless, I'll see you guys later.